What's going on, guys? Welcome back to my channel. Ali here. In today's video, we're going to be doing a cinematic editing breakdown of the following video that me and my buddy produced. Let's roll the following clip.
No doubt in my mind that I'll be Mr. Olympia.
So before we jump into the actual editing process here, I'm actually using Final Cut Pro for this project. The project was basically completed about 2 months ago, and I thought it was a great idea to kind of break it down considering the amount of feedback that we got from it. Jumping right into it, guys, the first thing that when it comes to basically creating a cinematic video, I always kind of approach it from the perspective of storytelling. And what I basically mean by that is that I don't necessarily think about transitions, cuts, music, first and foremost. The first thing I'm actually thinking about is how am I going to convey the story? And that kind of begins with the intro. I find the intro to be one of the most important aspects of storytelling because that's how you set the tone for the video in its entirety. If you don't capture someone's attention within the first 3 seconds, they're probably not going to watch your video in full. So with this project in particular, I wanted to approach it more so not just from a hype kind of highlight type of video, but more so an athlete type of spotlight video for Quinton Eriya. And essentially, I wanted to focus more so on telling his story in terms of how he's an athlete and everything that goes into the sport of bodybuilding before we get into like the crazy cuts and the crazy cinematics and all that kind of stuff. So essentially, that was my first priority, is basically telling the story of Quinton as an athlete and as a human being first and foremost, and then following suit to that is essentially all the crazy cuts and all the cinematics around bodybuilding and working out, and essentially kind of showing the physique that he's basically accomplished to this point. So let's jump right into the video here. So the first portion of the video is essentially a drone shot, nothing too crazy. It was done really well by my buddy Edward Figura. I'm going to link his channel in the description below. As you can see, the drone shot here was relatively simple, nothing too crazy kind of going on. And if I could just play the clip here. Pretty basic, right? But kind of coming into the timeline and looking at what's actually going on here, there's not too much sound design that's happening in this clip, but there's enough to kind of make the clip more interesting. So one way to kind of really spice up your clips and to kind of make them a lot more kind of 3D in the sense of being able to kind of capture people's attention is from the perspective of sound. And I'm going to be talking about this a lot as I kind of go through this video here. But I'm going to give you an example. So I'm going to replay the intro shot of this drone, and I'm actually going to turn off all the sound design that's basically associated with it. All right, drone shot with no sound design. So as you can see, the shot is, you know, it's pretty simple, nothing crazy kind of going on. And what me and my buddy basically did to kind of spice this up a little bit is that we actually added some rain sound effects into it, and also some urban environments such as traffic and such. And if I replay the intro clip again, as you can see, it's just an extra layer of sound that really kind of draws you into the video. All right, so we're just gonna let the video basically play on here.
My name's Quinton Eriya.
Okay, so now we're getting into the interview portion of this video. So in terms of the lighting setup that we use, we actually use a 3-point lighting system, nothing too crazy. We just had basically a key light, we had a fill light, and we also had a backlight, as you can see here, with the LED behind them. Again, when it comes to kind of filming interviews, it doesn't necessarily need to be over the top. We just wanted to be able to kind of light our subject to the best of our ability and to make it as pleasing as we could to the eye. Now, in terms of what's going on here, the actual interview portion itself is nothing too complicated. What you can see here on the timeline is that I have a base layer, which is my main A cam, and on my second layer, which you can see C003, essentially that's my B cam. And I kind of we like to film interviews this way just by being able to provide more than just one angle. It allows the viewer to kind of feel more it basically makes the viewing experience a little bit more refreshing, as opposed to just kind of staying at a stationary shot and just kind of looking at it from that perspective. That can get pretty boring pretty quickly, and this is kind of one technique that I really like to implement when I'm doing interviews, to really kind of allow more dynamic movements and dynamic kind of shots occurring when there's something very simple happening, such as an interview, for example. So I'm just gonna basically play the clip here.
Jamaican descent. My dad's Nigerian, my mother is Jamaican, and I'm a professional bodybuilder.
Now we're basically introducing some B-roll, just showcasing the environment, walking into a gym, setting up for the actual interview. Again, this is just pretty much B-roll, guys. This is basically, we're just trying to establish the environment that we're going to be focusing on for the majority of this video, which is basically a gym setting here.
Well, I started competing at 20, but I actually started training when I was around 7. I was 17 when I started training, and I was...
Okay, cool. So now we're jumping into the interview portion of this video here. Now, again, coming back to a sound perspective, obviously having the interview is extremely important, and you want to be able to hear your subject with full clarity. The interesting thing here is that when we came to choosing the type of soundtrack, we wanted to make sure that it wasn't overpowering the interview at all. It was just essentially providing enough type of sound in the background to kind of keep things kind of flowing. And we were able to find a really sick song, essentially where you're kind of, it's essentially when you're listening to it, it actually sounds like it's leading to something. There's a bit of tension involved, and that's kind of one way that you can kind of drag an interview out a little bit, because the majority of this video actually in itself, 80% of it is just pure interview. There is a big payoff at the end, but having a underlying soundtrack during the interview process or during the interview portion of the video just provides another layer of sound that can, again, basically retains someone's attention while they're basically listening to somebody speak.
And I was 18 when I decided, you know what, I like gaining muscle. I'm gonna keep on doing this.
So this is a technique that I actually like to implement too whenever I'm shooting long form interviews, is that I'll try to get the most important talking points within a few sentences, and then I'll actually throw in some B-roll between sentences and the interview portion to, again, just to provide a little bit extra layer of storytelling to showcase what exactly is happening within this actual video in itself.
The reasons were very vain. I think I just wanted to build confidence, wanted girls to like how I looked, kind of thing. I just wanted a little bit of biceps, and I wanted like a nice set of abs. And
so pretty much, essentially now the remainder of the interview portion is going to follow kind of like the same kind of route here, where essentially what's happening is that we're having an interview portion, we have sound design that's essentially kind of carrying the actual narrative, while also adding B-roll between interview portions to just add a little bit more level, add some more dynamics and cinematics to the actual video in itself. Now this actually goes on for a solid, quickly check this out, boom, 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 right up to, let's see here, for 6 minutes. So basically, we introduced the video with a drone establishing shot, some B-roll, jumping right into the interview, and then cutting back into some B-roll. We're actually repeating this process now for about 6 minutes during the entire interview process. Now, again, this is, typically speaking, this is a pretty long style of video when it comes to kind of interviewing somebody, but the way how we kind of wanted to approach it is that we wanted to make sure that someone would be willing to listen to 5+ minutes up to a point where there would be a very big payoff at the end. And within this video for Quinton, we kind of wanted to approach it from a perspective of, rather than going crazy right off the bat in terms of like crazy cinematics and cuts, we wanted to leave the best to the very end, and we call this kind of like a big payoff. You see this really common in a lot of monster movies in Hollywood, where a movie will be dragged on for like 2 hours, and like you won't see a monster for 80% of the movie until the last remaining 20%, where everything kind of just goes super crazy. Again, this is just a filmmaking technique that I personally wanted to apply for this video, because my main focus was to showcase the athlete first and foremost as a human being, and then their actual physique second. All right, guys, so now I'm going to jump into my favorite portion of the video, and I call this the big payoff at the end for this particular athlete spotlight video. This is where things get a little bit crazy.
Oh man, I have no doubt in my mind that I'll be Mr. Olympia.
All right, guys. So now we're going to break down the big payoff at the end. Obviously, that was it was a pretty exciting video to edit, at least that portion especially. When it comes to the actual timeline here, as you can see, we're transitioning now from the interview portion to a lot more of the quicker cuts. And again, this comes back to the idea of sound. We're transitioning from the main soundtrack now to more so the more intense kind of in-your-face soundtrack. And one way we're able to transition from a slower tempo to a much faster tempo is that we actually used a riser and a cinematic boom to allow that transition between two songs which sound completely different, pretty seamless. Again, now we're also following a different change of tempo where now we're introducing a lot faster cuts. And by introducing these faster cuts, we're also using different type of piano hits to also match the sequencing of the length of these clips, which are a lot shorter now compared to the actual interview portion. Okay, let me see here. Boom, 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 boom. Let it play out. So in terms of the actual camera settings that we used, we shot this video unfortunately in 4K at 24 frames per second because we did not have our hands on the A7S III yet, which shoots 4K at 120 FPS, which is a dream come true, but one day. So we used a combination of 4K at 24 FPS and we also used 1080p at 60 frames per second. As you can see, for the majority of the video, there's not any slow-mo that's happening because most of it's an interview. But when it comes to the actual highlight or the big payoff at the end, there are some definitely slow-mo shots in there. Again, this kind of comes down to, I mean, a common question I always get is, when do you use slow-mo, when do you not use slow-mo? And it really comes down to in terms of what you're trying to shoot and what type of feel that you're going for. I really like to use slow-mo to kind of change the tempo of a video. And again, it can really vary depending on what you're filming and what the actual context of the video that you're filming in itself. In terms of the actual lenses that we used an A-cam of a G Master from 16 to 35 millimeters, and we also used a B-cam of a 56 millimeter. By being able to switch between so many different focal lengths when you're filming a video, it just adds so many layers that can really kind of keep captures people's attention and also kind of retain it. In terms of the actual timeline here, I'm editing in a 4K timeline at 24 frames per second. All right, guys, this pretty much wraps up today's video of this cinematic editing breakdown using Final Cut Pro. Hope you guys found some pretty good tips and techniques. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.